I was thinking we should just start by talking about the cannibalism case from the first lecture by Sandel. I'll let you guys. Do you have thoughts? So the cannibal case, just to recap, you've got these three people, civilians, on a raft after a yacht goes down. One is a cabin boy who's an orphan who's 18 who ran off to for adventure to work on this yacht. He drinks salt water, which they advised him against doing, and so he gets very sick. So he might not be doing very well health-wise. He's kind of out of it. They decide to draw lots to decide who they're going to kill and eat because they haven't had food in many days and rescue doesn't seem to be coming. They decide not to do that, and instead one of them kills the cabin boy, and then they eat him, and I think they're saved a week later. So, thoughts?
I mean, I thought it was interesting how they were saying that the London Tribunal or whatever newspaper it was sympathizing with them. I thought that was kind of an interesting look to see, because I don't know if in our time people would be sympathizing with them, but I think it's kind of a good example of we hope we'd never have to do it and we think we wouldn't do it, but if we were in that situation and if we hadn't gone, if any of us hadn't gone 11 days without food, stabbing the cabin boy with a penknife starts to look a lot better, it's one of those things where until you're in that situation, you don't really know what you'd do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think in these days, you'd start seeing Instagram posts about why cannibalism isn't okay, even in whatever circumstance. I think it was fine what they did. I was kind of curious, what the conviction, were they convicted? They didn't.
I think they were put to death.
Oh, okay.
They're executed.
I mean, isn't that just kind of a waste?
Yeah, that kind of defeats the point. If anything, the argument should have been the cabin boy was able to sacrifice his life so they could live. Now you're going to kill them for that. Would you rather they all starved?
If they all, it's 3 people alive instead of you can't say that the boy was harmed more.
Yeah, he would have died anyway. If anything, it was a quick death.
The boy was going to die.
It strikes me as special about this case that it seemed like they were all going to die. So, if they kill somebody who's healthy and is going about their life and take their organs, or in this case, I guess they did take his organs. They just ate them instead of getting transplants. That the person's dying anyway. I think it's a little bit shitty that they didn't draw lots, right? They should have left it to chance. So I think that the fact that they decided that his life was more sacrificable on the grounds that he was an orphan and young, I guess, and they were bigger than him, maybe. Do you think so? He seems that they talk a lot in the lecture whether they think consent would make a difference. If they had asked the cabin boy hey, you're sick, can we eat you? And the kid's fine. Do we think that would have changed the morality of the case?
I think if the kid consented, there would have been absolutely nothing wrong with it. I think you can, in that case, you could not make an argument. One thing that I do wonder about with the drawing lots thing is that it's clearly okay if the guy consents right before he dies, although you might wonder if he's delirious at the point and maybe he can't give his informed consent. But I wonder about the ability to withdraw consent, because normally during informed consent, you're able to withdraw it at any time. I wonder whether you're able to consent to commit yourself to something and you can consent to not be able to withdraw your consent later, because in this case, right? I mean, can somebody say we're going to draw lots and then they get picked and now they withdraw their consent? Can we commit ourselves to consenting and say I can't withdraw my consent if I'm picked?
I mean, I think the example of the contract was good because you're choosing who's going to die. So if you get picked, easy way out is to just say, oh, I withdraw my consent, and then you just keep running the lots. So I feel like it has to be kind of on a closed loop if they're going to get anywhere. Personally, I think it was fine to kill the cabin boy because he was the most sick and he did have no dependents or anything, and I think it would have been a shame to kill someone who was perfectly healthy when, even if the cabin boy had food, he was probably going to die a lot quicker than the other was as well.
So do you think that I think the cabin boy wouldn't be able to withdraw his consent in this case. In a lot of contracts, it makes sense that you could pull out, but like, for example, if you say, if I consented to some sort of arrangement, which then meant other people depended on me and now their life depends on me, and then I withdraw from the contract and then they all die, the kid has already gotten the benefit. Like had he won the lottery and somebody else lost and they were eating the other person, he definitely would have stuck to the agreement, right? So I feel like there has to be some sort of cases where you can withdraw your consent and some sort of cases where you can't. I don't know what the principal difference is, but it seems like this would be a good case for why, whatever the principle is, I don't know what it would be, but that you're not allowed to withdraw consent in this sort of case. I think you're stuck with it as soon as you can withdraw, like before they roll the dice or pull the lots, but as soon as you find out that you're the loser or that somebody else is, you're stuck with the result at that point, I would think. But
yeah, and that did happen. The one guy did pull consent. He was like, I'm not doing the lots thing. We shouldn't do that.
Yeah, you mentioned that you thought it was important that the kid was an orphan. I don't know if that, I mean, that sort of utilitarian way that kind of matters. The fact that the kid seemed like he was already the sickest and
I think it was more that he was sick than that he was like an orphan.
Okay, because you just mentioned orphan and that, like, yeah.
Yeah, I meant like no dependents, like he didn't have kids, not that he had parents, which I mean, I guess is
that's a happy accident, which makes it a little less tragic that he died. But I don't think that was a reason
it's a happy
for him
accident.
Dying over the other.
I agree. Like, was there even a cure for the drinking the salt water back then? Like, could they really have even helped him if they got rescued?
I don't know. I don't know how messed up. I mean, I know drinking salt water can mess you up. I assume that he's dehydrated and lacking food, and then he also drinks salt water. He's probably in a pretty bad position. I don't know why they couldn't just wait for him to die. If he was really dying, like, just let him die and then eat him. Well, that's the other thing. One of the students complained that it's cannibalism, so it's wrong. I suspect that none of us have a problem with it on those grounds.
I mean, it's kind of like gross, but gross doesn't make it morally reprehensible. So
I felt like, especially like just the idea of like eating like uncooked like human flesh, just like I feel like ugh. But at the same time, like if you haven't eaten for like 8 days, it might become more appealing.
Yeah, I was thinking about it and I was like, they had no way to cook that in the boat, and it made we were eating our breakfast so much more gruesome. It's like I don't even want to think about how they do it, but it's the same thing. Like if I was in that situation, I'm sure I would be right there chowing along with them, like if you're that hungry enough, you'll do about anything.
Yeah, the cannibalism, like if the kid died on his own and then they ate him, I can't imagine what the objection should be. The problem is that they killed him. It seems like the fact that they didn't draw lots, that it was against his will, is a problem.
I mean, I think people could argue to the cannibalism. I just don't think they'd have a very good argument. Like after
what would they say? That it's unnatural or something?
It's gross. They'd probably say it's undervalues like humanity. Like we eat animals, we don't eat humans because we think we're better than animals. It'd probably be some sort of argument like that, and then they'd probably resort to like religion or something. That'd be my guess.
Well, like showing respect, we have all sorts of ways we show respect, like shaking hands or bowing or right, and those are conventions and we can set those up. So maybe like not eating meat is one way in which we can show respect for fellow humans, but we could also just not have that convention and say the way we show respect is something different.
I mean, I think you already murdered him, so I think that's one of the ultimate signs of not showing someone respect. So like you've already kind of done enough damage. But then as David said, in the the Odyssey, it was like destroying the body was almost worse than killing someone. So maybe people can make that argument that he was harmed after death by him being consumed, which I'm sure he would not have wanted.
Yeah, I think that like with the cannibalism, I think the strongest, or just in this case, I think the strongest argument that like the prosecution has is, it's murder, they killed him, you can't like killing is categorically wrong. And like his killing was an intended consequence. Like it wasn't just merely foreseen. It was intended. They had to kill him in order to eat it. Still, I don't buy it because like he was gonna die anyway, it seems. And it seems like they just like did something that would make more people be alive. But then I do think that maybe eating somebody's body after their death is like slightly wrong without their consent. Just from like a like like I think that you can be wronged after your death. I mean, it's definitely not even close to as bad as killing him. So if you're gonna, like Sophia said, if you're gonna kill him, then it doesn't really matter all that much if you eat him after he's dead, because the killing was definitely much a bigger harm to the kid than eating him was.
Eating somebody after they're dead without their consent seems like a problem, but I think there's some way in which there's an overriding concern when your life depends on it. I mean, maybe not for killing people. Like I don't think that some people say, I think one of the students said, Marcus said, you got to do what you got to do to stay. I don't think you get to do anything you have to stay alive. Like if I had to kill 30 school children to save my life, I think I should just go down with the boat and like let myself die. Like you don't get a free pass to do anything, but like probably small things. Like if I come across a cabin in the woods that's got food supplies and I'm lost and I've been in the woods for 2 weeks and I don't have any food, it's stealing that food without someone's permission that seems like a small transgression for an absolute insane amount of need on my part. I think killing somebody is a pretty serious thing. I don't think it gives you a pass for that, but maybe eating their dead body, which seems like a pretty small transgression, a violation of their consent.
Yeah, the only issue is typically dead bodies don't appear like normally you have to kill someone to get the dead body.
Yeah, normally. Well, I mean, if you're a med student, you're gonna
all the cadavers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
you're
you have
a
an opportunity
struggling
to take a bite out of somebody if you want, if you're like curious. If you're a physiology major, they have cadavers that they cut open. And
I feel like those things, do they like pump them full of chemicals? That just
I think you're right. I think that they probably
just
pump them full of
seems
chemicals,
to be what happens. But yeah, to me, honestly, the biggest thing is that, say they sacrificed the one kid for the rest to survive, say he gave consent, whatever, you killed the other two. It just seems like his sacrifice was made futile. Like it seems like the same argument that like some people who are like get upset for pulling out of wars and saying the people who died there died in vain if we don't like finish what we started there. It's kind of like seems similar to the like I don't know. It just seems like
I don't know. Well, I definitely
died in vain.
I definitely think that they shouldn't have executed those guys, even just for extenuating circumstance. Like that's a pretty rough position to be in, and like it's not the normal case of murder where like I want $500 or $1,000 or 10,000, so I'm gonna go kill my neighbor and take his money or some sort of revenge with my bot. Like this seems like a pretty tough.
It was also like further, like it was like what 200 years ago, so I think laws were a lot stricter then, but it seems like they could have just like thrown him over the side of the boat and like kind of gotten rid of they executed people for much less, but it seems like such a shame. Like if they had kind of just dumped the body over, I don't know, maybe they would have gotten away with it.
Yeah, and they'd say, oh, like he didn't show
all this blood, fish. Here,
I think the problem was that the guy who originally didn't want to be a part, somebody told the story.
Blabbed.
One of them, yeah.
But didn't he end up dying
the guy
too?
Just admitted it.
I
think they executed all of them. Even the guy. I'd have to double check that. But even the guy who like turned himself in, if I remember correctly. There was one of the students. He said, I think what was nice about the lottery. Somebody was defending a student named Matt in the crowd, and he says, when you do the lottery and you choose that way, you're eliminating the aspect of taking your life to be more important than the cabin boys. And that I think is right. Like maybe that's sort of one of the fundamental things that Kant says that morality requires, is that you don't take yourself to have more value than anybody else, or your reasons as more valuable than anyone else's. And it seems like the lottery move helps really mitigate what some of the problems that a Kantian would have with eating the. I mean, you're putting yourself at risk of losing and being eaten and killed. So you're like, I'm in the same. Metaphorically and literally, I'm in the same boat as that cabin boy.
I think that was nice because most of the arguments for this are utilitarian, and his explanation of the lottery kind of made it Kantian. I thought that was kind of a nice turn to kind of get the Kantians in on this one too. Because yeah, it does. It's nice because then all of you are like, the cabin boy is just as likely as getting eaten as the captain in that situation, which is, I think, pretty fair.
What about, let's see, was there anything else? I'm looking at my list of notes from the one student said they don't like the idea of the fate of other people's lives being in your hands. I always find that people say that. I always find that a weird response. I mean, does that mean being a doctor is immoral? Or like we can't have doctors or policemen, because that assumes that the fate of other people's lives can be put in our hands. We should just get rid of those jobs and let Nate, what happens, because the idea that there's some sort of prohibition on making decisions that involve life and death, so I think would end up like really radically changing the way we live our lives and require us to get rid of things like doctors and policemen, and because all of those things involve decisions which people live and die on.
That reminds me of the.
Is there a smarter interpretation of this, like, fate? Don't put other people's lives in your hands.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Dan Muller like objection, right? Like, kind of, I'm not sure that like it might be immoral to like kill the cabin boy, and so maybe I shouldn't do it. Like, maybe it's just like really difficult to like figure out like these issues of life and death, and so we shouldn't. I don't agree with that, but like, I feel like that's a smarter way to put it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, what if I make the wrong decision? I can't go back on it because I've killed them.
Yeah.
Right. I kind of feel like maybe that's why we should.
I mean, you could say. Yeah, you're right. You could say something like, listen, if I killed the cabin boy and it was immoral of me, I've done this terrible wrong and I'm a bad person. If I just die out here, at least I die with my hands clean, right? I'm not a murder, like, so you might say, I don't know if it's murder or not. I don't know if killing this cabin boy is morally permissible or not, but just not to take the risk of being a bad person, I'm gonna go the not eating him route. I guess that would be the sort of moral risk Dan Muller style argument here.
Yeah, I think people are scared to make those decisions, but I don't think it's right to say you don't want to make those decisions either, because like, someone has to be EMTs, someone needs to be the police, someone needs to fight in wars. Like, would you rather sit passively by? Like, what's the saying? It's like, bad men can't do things because good men interfere. I mean, I'm butchering it, but I think that happens to a certain degree. And if too many people are too passive, then a lot of really bad things happen in the world. And I don't think that's a good policy to stand on. Definitely morally, I don't think we can be too passive to a certain extent, because then not good things happen. Like, we have to involve ourselves to a certain degree. Like, we have to be uncomfortable. Like, you're gonna have to risk making the morally wrong decision in order to help people. Like, we're not perfect, but if you don't try at all, I think that's worse than just saying, I don't even want to try.
Yeah, and these guys have families, right? You can imagine if you just constantly avoid making decisions and let yourself get killed every time a decision's hard to make, like, you're depriving your family of a father. It seems like, or a mother. You should be willing to try and not give up.
Or like how we said, if you're just swayed by every momentary pleasure, it's like, are you even human? Like, you're just a dodo bird at that point. You're just oh, I don't
Yeah.
want to make this decision. I don't want to make this decision. It's like at a certain point, you have to just decide for yourself, or you're not really human.
There was one kid, one of the kids or the students in the audience. They said they should draw lots, and then the loser should commit suicide. No one else should be the one. I found that a little. I don't see why. Like if what we're gonna do is we're gonna draw lots, and then the one who loses is gonna die, and we're gonna eat them. Like maybe he's like, I don't really want to have to do it myself. Could you do it to me? Or I don't. I think that would be I think killing yourself is probably a very difficult thing to bring yourself to do. So if for whatever reason I wanted to die, I might say like, hey buddy, take me out. I don't want to have to do it myself. I don't see why there's a requirement that the person do it. If it's okay for the person to do it themselves and for them to do the lot drawing and to go through with this arrangement, it doesn't seem different to have somebody else kill them with a penknife versus I don't know how he would have killed himself, but
I think maybe
no,
the
you think
student
suicide makes a difference?
maybe the student did that as like I guess that's the ultimate, again, just reinforcing that consent that you would have to kill yourself. But I see what you mean is it would, in circumstance, like I think it would be
Yeah.
kinder if you just pre-agreed, or maybe it was like, hey, Joe here wants to be killed, like Sam would kind of rather do it himself, but as long as you decided that whoever draws the lots dies, I don't think it really matters how.
Yeah, I think if I were in that situation, go ahead. If we drew lots and somebody pulled up the short straw, I'd already have the rock in my hand, and like just immediate, like like no time to be sad, no time to see what's coming. Like we all agreed to this. We drew lots. Like now, like let's just get this thing done as quickly as possible afterwards.
Yeah, we're all hungry,
I think that like or when it comes to like is it worse to be killed than commit suicide? I really think it's the same. I don't know, because I mean people will argue that like, well, what about like intentions and whatnot and so on. I think that ultimately consequences outweigh most other things. And I mean maybe that's a little controversial, but like I think consequences are pretty important. And in the end, if somebody's killing someone, or they're dying, they're still dead, right? I mean, it doesn't matter how they're killed, they're being killed, and like, I feel like, yeah, it's the only reason why the student suggested this, I think, is because we have this like inbuilt aversion to like killing people. We want to feel like we don't have their blood on our hands.
Yeah, a lot of times utilitarians object to Kantians and saying, at times you've got to sacrifice the few for the many, and you just aren't willing to get your hands dirty as morality requires. You're so obsessed with your own selfish purity that you're not willing to do what morality demands of you. So it's called the clean hands objection to Kantian ethics. Last thoughts about the cannibalism?
Yeah.
No. So here's a general question, not about the philosophical material. What did you guys think of the student body at Harvard, or like the lecture? I mean, they cover the similar material. The students ask, I think, similar questions to like what our class covers.
Yeah, I was surprised by how similar the kind of questioning lines sort of popped up. I thought that was really interesting how in like a small classroom or a really large one of Harvard undergrads, the same kind of lines of inquiry pop up, at least initially.
Mm-hmm. One thing really upset me
about
them. Oh, sorry. Which was that?
No, go ahead. I'm excited now. Something that really upset you. I'm like, now I'm on the edge of my seat here.
When they were talking about like utilitarianism, and they were like saying, well, is the human life, maybe it's worth $200,000, maybe it's worth $2 million. Maybe it's so expensive you could never count it up, right? But like, I mean, think about Peter Singer, right? Like you can donate like $1,000 and save some child, right, who's like starving, famine relief, right?
Right.
How could you possibly like say that a human life is worth $2 million if you're not willing to like donate $1,000 to save someone?
So you think they were overvaluing human life drastically? They should have been undervaluing it more?
Well, I just think it's kind of hypocritical. I mean, because we say that like, life is like so important, it matters so much. But when we really say that, I feel like we're saying life, like our lives, like our like American lives, our like Western civilization lives, our like expensive lives matter. But you know, when we say that like lives matter, it seems like it doesn't extend to like people in other countries. It seems like it doesn't extend as far as it should. It seems like the valuation is drastically different.
Yeah, I think
I
that's
think, I mean, I
definitely
think
true.
you're right that there's probably an yeah, I mean, there's like an aspect of they're not thinking, they're like kind of got this self-righteous, like a life is worth $3 million when in fact they're not willing to donate $1,000 to save that seems like they're not really giving an honest evaluation in their opinion and like how much they'd be willing to spend to save a life. But you know, they could make some sort of supererogatory argument, say that any amount of money, you killing somebody is not what is the, they don't need to donate to people in need because that's extra credit, that's supererogatory. But if
I
you're going to
mean,
kill somebody, it's worth, I don't know what to, actually, maybe I don't know how to make sense of this.
but yeah, I think it would be interesting to see, like, if you think human life is worth $2 million, why wouldn't you donate $1,000 to some like African or East Asian
Right.
charity? Like, I think it would be really interesting to have during that same class have like a presenter from UNICEF come up and be like, all right, you guys think life's so valuable, how many people are willing to donate $1,000? And genuinely, I'd be really interested to see if those like who saved life, who really wanted to overvalue life, I would really like to see if they put their money where their mouth is. Like, I would be just really curious about that.
Mhm. I'm curious, what did y'all
One
think
of the things,
of the like the Ford case where Ford was
no,
like,
go,
we could have put in this part, it would have been $11 and it would have saved like 2,000 people's lives. But if everyone's life is worth $20,000, $200,000, then
Yeah, it was like,
that.
how much are the lawsuits going to cost us versus putting in the part? I mean, it's kind of shocking because I'm sure that happens all the time in companies, but I think the jury was rightfully shocked, and I'm really glad they got a really large settlement out of it. But yeah, I'm sure it happens all the time.
I think they could have raised the price of the car $11. I don't think it would have made that much of a difference in the number of sales. I think people would have been, and then you could argue, you could like put on the thing, you know, we put in like this extra safety feature.
I don't know, the Ford Motor Company's cost benefit analysis. I'm sure they did a good job.
I'm sure whoever made that decision got a bonus, a promotion, and then left the
Oh
company 2
yeah,
years later with, you
most
know,
likely.
without, yeah, I doubt that there was any personal responsibility
Of course not.
taken by him.
It's only a decision that affects
about-
I feel like those lives.
What about just the general way in which he talks about philosophy at the beginning? I think he talks about how that, you know, a lot of times we struggle with these questions, but there's a reason that we have to keep worrying. I mean, there's reasons why people have to worry about this all the time is because we live these decisions. Like we have to make decisions about, you know, what parts to put into a Ford Pinto and where we spend medical dollars in medical research. We have to, doctors have to make decisions about whose lives to save. Society needs to make decisions about, you know, how to punish people for committing cannibalism, things like I don't know if he's Michael Sandel sounded a little fatalistic about, he's like, well, how, you know, we still don't have answers. I feel a little more optimistic. I feel like having this sort of utilitarian framework of understanding it, this Kantian framework of understanding it, maybe one of them's right, but at the very least we've made progress better than like whatever gut feelings we used to go by, or like complete, you know, like it's, we're at least trying to analyze and understand the different pulls and different directions in these cases in a more intelligent way that can help us make, I think, better moral decisions, even if we're not sure what the exact right answer is yet.
Yeah, my favorite line from it was when he was saying how, like, once you start that inquiry, you can't stop it. Like, once you learn some of these things, you can't unlearn it. Like, we're never going to be as disgusted by cannibalism as I think we would have been at the initial part of class, you know? Like, certain things, it's like, once you open that door, you can't really close it, like Pandora's box in a certain aspect. And I think it was nice how he mentioned that, because that's definitely true in terms of a lot of aspects of learning.
I think it makes the class seem really enticing. Like,
Yeah, it makes it
ooh.
seem like super dangerous and like,
Yeah.
but even like think of like the super cringy like sex ed class you had in high school. Like you can never unsee those things. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think
The
really leaning into like the idea of, you know, like this class is like gonna show you like the forbidden fruit, and then once
yeah,
you can never go back, right? Are you sure you want to continue? Of course, everyone's gonna say yes, and they're gonna attend every class,
and the
right?
teacher's like, sweet, no one's dropping it. Moving on.
Well, so interesting thing about Harvard, you don't register for classes until after the first week. So the first week you can go to any class you want. And
That's kind of
so
cool.
you like sit in on the first week for like a ton of classes, and then you register the second week of classes. So the first week of class lecture really does need to be enticing to like keep people willing to stay in the class.
That's kind of interesting because normally it's more like at other places it's like, okay, what do I need? It's like, all right, well, it's this teacher or this teacher. And then you like go and rate my professor. So it's kind of funny that like the professors are really like kind of competing for your spot.
Right.
Or like week 2, they're like, all right, that's all over with. Now the final.
It's kind of crazy because by the second week they have no idea how many TAs they need. They have no idea how many people are going to enroll. So like,
oh yeah, that is kind of uncertain. It's like I wonder how they make TAs. Do they just have like a big group and they're like, all right, we need 10 in this class, 2 in this class, or
they're like yeah, I mean they have a bunch of like people they draw upon, and then but they still don't like, you don't know if you're actually going to have an assignment until week 2 because classes have no idea how big their enrollment, and if like all of a sudden the enrollment's huge and a whole bunch of kids enroll just because like on week 2 they're like scrounging for TAs and they
that doesn't seem like the
was there
most
anything
effective
else? So I
system.
don't I think it's a really nice system for like letting students be able to try different classes. I bet you philosophy classes would have higher enrollment than they normally would because there's a lot of people who might be willing to like dip their toe in for the first week and see what the class is like, and then I think they could be enticed into staying.
Especially
One thing I noticed about the class that I thought was really interesting was that philosophy classes normally are very white. They don't have that many like minorities in them and so on. And they named the class like justice. What's the right thing to do? I think that marketing helped them like reach a broader audience, right? Rather than like, I mean, I'm not saying that like it's bad that, you know, our class is called like ethics and contemporary culture or whatnot, but I think that like that branding probably did help them a little bit reach more people.
yeah, even just giving it a different name kind of helped, you think? It's like just
There's
just
another
hearing philosophy sounds more dry.
There's basically the same version of this course that goes under a different name called The Rights and Wrongs of Killing, I think, and it's offered by the philosophy department here. And it's basically the exact same course. It's just under a sexier name to, I guess, help enrollment.
Yeah, what are the demographics of that class? Do you know?
I don't know.
Or have you ever taught it?
I've never taught that. So yeah, the rights and wrong. There's like a slight difference, but yeah, I've never gotten this class under that name. But was there anything else that we wanted to talk about? I mean, they talk about pushing the fat man from the bridge to stop the trolley. So and the taking the medicine from the one room to the other room and taking the person's organs to save lives. I think we've covered that in this class already.
Oh, what did you guys think of the Shakespeare Simpson fear factor one? Because that was something I don't think we've discussed before.
Oh, good. Yeah, that is actually something we didn't discuss. I don't include that in mine, or I don't normally do it. I'm only going to do it just because I want to watch these justice lectures and he talks. I mean, often people do talk about it. So the claim here is that utilitarians should admit that there's higher and lower quality pleasures, and we should try maximizing pleasure or happiness, but the higher pleasures count, I don't know, double in the calculus. So the pleasure you get from Shakespeare is, I guess, double in the calculus as opposed to the pleasure you get from watching Fear Factor is the claim.
I think people are just a little stuck up, to be honest. I think that like maybe what you could say is like, you know, if you're stuck like in a cabin in Kansas by yourself for the rest of your life, you know, maybe like you're gonna get bored of The Simpsons, right? There's not like much to be thought about there, and maybe like Shakespeare would allow you to like think, maybe like just keep thinking about that like forever. Whereas with The Simpsons, like eventually it's just kind of all over, and I feel like I would feel awful after a day of watching nothing but The Simpsons. Um, but like just like from like a happiness perspective, like it really is like quite silly, I think, to say that like watching um The Simpsons would be at all even remotely worse than like reading Shakespeare.
What do you think, Sophia?
I mean, I think it depends personally, but I do think you can make an argument that Shakespeare is more nuanced and has more approaches and has survived the centuries for a reason because it is a greater work of literature. Whether you derive more enjoyment from that or not, I think you could argue is one based on just how much you like it, your understanding of it. Like, if someone in fifth grade cannot understand Shakespeare in the same way that someone who's 30 can. Like, they have not developed and lived enough to understand it or understand the funny way they talk. Like, you just can't. But I mean, I do think it's objectively more valuable to read Shakespeare than watch The Simpsons. Whether you like that or not is another thing. And I think a lot of people do kind of act a little more like snobby by saying that, oh, I would rather do Shakespeare. And if they're being honest with themselves, they'd probably just watch The Simpsons. But I do think objectively that Shakespeare is more like nourishing from a literary perspective. I do think that would be the higher pleasure.
I feel like it goes against the spirit of utilitarianism that just says whatever I just want to maximize happiness, so it includes the dog's happiness, and whatever brings you happiness is what brings you happiness. And the idea that I get to single out, I mean, he wants to claim that in fact you actually like Shakespeare better because that's why you would pick it over, I guess, The Simpsons, or if you could only take one book to a desert island, do you take Shakespeare or do you take I don't know, a joke book? Um, I don't know. It strikes me as I'm a little bit in the it seems pretentious and presumptuous of the utilitarian to seems like the utilitarian, it goes against the spirit of it, which is supposed to be all I care about is happiness. Whatever brings you happiness, I need to do that to maximize your happiness. But so I don't know if I buy this idea that they're going to be able to say that these higher pleasures are somehow better
Oh, I
than the
thought it
lower
was a
pleasures.
I thought it was a Kantian objection to utilitarianism, saying that you actually shouldn't be able to rank the pleasures. I thought that was what it was.
That's one way to say to wait. So say that again. So you take it as
When I
an
first heard
objection
it,
to
I thought
Kantian
it
saying,
was, yeah, I thought it was the Kantians making fun of the utilitarians, saying, well, which one do you prefer? And the utilitarian would just say, well, whichever one you like the best. And then the Kantian would make arguments saying that one is more better for certain academic and structural reasons, and this utilitarian would just kind of be annoyed with them. And I thought that was sort of an objection to it by the Kantians.
I mean, you could make, I feel like Kantians, we respect free choice. So like whatever, everything else in the world only has value if you choose it.
Yeah,
So
true.
people choose this, then, but you could make some sort of claim that here is a way a Kantian could argue the other way, that when you value free will and humanity, like these activities which exhibit and like draw upon your skill, like the sort of special unique properties of being human are somehow a better use of your humanity than the lower things. I don't buy that line. I think Kantian should be just say free will matters and what people choose for themselves is what matters, not so I won't judge their choices. I'll just say whatever they choose is worthwhile because they chose it.
I think that one thing that the teacher seemed to talk about a lot, in these lectures that I didn't really think is a problem is the idea of, can you rank, like how much worse is like these pains, like, living in Kansas or like having your toe cut off or whatnot. Is it possible to rank, happiness and suffering, and like how bad like killing somebody would be? And I mean, maybe it's kind of difficult to figure out like where killing is on the suffering scale, but like, I think that it is not really a big problem to try to figure out, if we can compare these things, because I don't know. I mean, I feel like if utilitarianism turns out to be true, and like you've proven it and whatnot, it's definitely true, then just saying like, well, it's a little difficult to figure out exactly what it prescribes doesn't seem like a good objection to the whole theory, in my opinion.
I think that that's probably all the stuff we're talking about this week. Next week is going to be more interesting because it covers some stuff we haven't even gotten to. It's going to start talking about libertarian political philosophy. So I don't know how familiar you are with that, but the idea, this argument that in particular is pushed by a guy named Robert Nozick of the Nozick's Experience Machine fame, arguing that basically government should be tiny. We should only have a police force, a legal system, and a military, and then everything else is illegitimate for governments to do. But yeah, what do you guys think of? All right, so I'm going to stop it there.